Welcome to the Vetiver Vibes podcast. We're your hosts, Nikki Frazier and Rachel Dean, certified clinical aromatherapists. We are excited to have you here on today's episode where you know that you'll get the best essential oil scoop.
This episode is brought to you by Essentria, a leading online school for aromatherapy. If you want to learn more about Ayurvedic Indian head massage, check out the courses at www.schoolofessentria.com. Welcome to this week's episode of Vetiver Vibes. Nikki Frazier here with Marilu Wren. Marilu is a mom of four from south of England as an advanced EFT practitioner and kinesiologist. Alongside her passion for energy medicine, she refers to herself as an energy coach. Using her training skill set and lived experience of the last 2 difficult decades, she has a passion to help her clients and their loved ones to overcome adversity and challenging circumstances, to help them release shock and trauma from their body and restore emotional balance through the energy coaching, while also resourcing them for resilience moving forward. She finds EFT tapping a powerful asset in her work. This evidence-based therapy helps to calm the amygdala, reset the nervous system, and hardwire the brain to deal better with adversity, while her beloved meditation has been shown to improve the emotional resilience of the brain. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yeah, and I know I'm a big fan of EFT tapping. I don't use it as much as I should. I took small training in it years and years ago, and I got into it quite at that point, and then it just, like a lot of things, if you don't use it, you kind of lose it and you get out of the habit. So I'm super excited to have you on to share this because there are so many great benefits. Before we dive in, though, we do always like to ask all of our guests, what is your favorite essential oil if you use them, or your favorite scent if you don't use them?
Has to be frankincense for me. Every time. I love it. I love it for pain as well. I use it with myrrh for pain, and also I use it as an incense. It's just my go-to if I just want to, and it just turns that switch off for me. I love it. Or lavender. Lavender for sleeping, but I think frankincense is my go-to.
Awesome. I love it. All right, let's dive in. One thing, could you first off explain what is EFT? For a lot of people, they might never have heard of it, or they just see like people doing like this weird tappy thing on them.
Yeah.
So can you kind of explain what is it exactly?
Hopefully people have heard of meridians. Meridians are our energy system. They're like a river that runs through us. We have 14 and 12 of them are connected, and they make a long river where one ends, another starts. And they are connected to our chakras, which are connected to auras and to the universal energy. But if you're not being woo-woo, when we're tapping, we're literally tapping on the end of those meridian points. So the points are on the top of the head and they work around the face here, and all of these are meridian endings, and they come here under the arm where the bra is, and then we go through all the fingers. Each of the meridians are connected to an organ, and each of those organs are connected to emotions. So for example, your stomach and spleen are all about empathy and sympathy. Your lung and your large intestine are to do with grief, guilt, and regret. So as you're tapping on these, this kinetic energy is rebalancing any stuck energy in that. And so initially when they came up with it, from what I understand, is to go, well, you're dealing with anger, so we'll just tap on the meridian for anger. But actually, when you're in a session, someone can be really quite angry to start with, and then go, actually, I'm more frustrated now, or actually, I didn't realize I'm really quite sad. So what's lovely about going through the process is you're kind of connecting with all those different emotions that can show up through, different aspects that we're dealing with. And as you say, it's been shown to calm down the amygdala and the nervous system. And there's lots of studies comparing it to psychotherapy and CBT and things like that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So would you say it might be similar to acupressure, like that same concept of acupressure? You're pressing on a certain spot to have, to stimulate that spot, which then has the
acupressure will work on points that are along the meridian. They're like little wells that access the meridian for energy, whereas we're going on the end. But it's the same kind of thing. It's rebalancing that energy with it. But also lots of techniques within EFT that we're looking at aspects and how we deal with trauma and how we sneak up on it. So it's it's not talk therapy at all, but it's being able to have that kind of assessment of a situation from an emotional and somatic point of view. And then, because in any situation when we have shock, whether it be a dog bite or a diagnosis or an argument, our bodies feel that. Our bodies are an energy system. We hold that and we remember it through what we're hearing, what we're smelling at the time, what we're tasting, and that settles within us in energy. So when we access that, when you feel anger, where do you feel that? And we're literally talking to the body and listening to what it's saying. So when we're using all those aspects of color or texture or sound, it helps to reconnect with that body when that trauma got stuck within it.
Awesome. And you're talking there, a few things came to mind instantly of like, especially at the beginning where you said, if someone came to you for anger, you would just do the anger originally, whereas then realize, and to me, it's like, yeah, we're an onion, right?
Mm.
We might come in for one thing, but there might be 10 things in that suitcase that we don't realize that we are slowly
Every
unpacking.
time, every
And
time.
so it is important to go through everything so that nothing is missed, and there's always different links throughout the body emotionally. Like I always say, we are mind, body, spirit, and we're very interconnected, and everything is connected within us. So you
Mm.
can't always just focus on one, because the body system along with the meridian system are all connected, and
Yeah.
so we need to really look at the whole picture, which is
Mm.
why I do like that it does go through multiple different spots and not just that one specific emotion that one specific spot is focused on, because we do need to look at it all.
Yeah. And one of the great questions we have in EFT is, when did you feel this before? So if it's that anger or that unsettling, I mean, I remember I had two clients, I think they were a day after each other, two businesswomen. They were dealing with how they were approaching their business, but both, when I said, how did I deal with that before, it both came down to their mothers. And I just thought, gosh, the mother wound or the sister wound is so great. So often it is about not being good enough at school, or having to stand there and read that report age 9, or but they both had quite tragic stories about sharing very personal things that happened with their mother, and their mother not believing them in quite, and it was created this whole sort of systemic change for both of them. So yes, often they come, oh, I know what it is, it's that. And then you start asking, going, oh yeah, I can't quite realize that actually that thing that
Right.
happened 20 years ago was the foundation of all of this. We talk about a tabletop in EFT. So the tabletop is the limiting belief, or you have a limiting belief or a core belief. So limiting belief is uh that men make bad bosses, or all dogs bite, or whatever it is. And a core belief is, I'm really bad at that. So
Yeah.
it becomes very personal. And those tabletops are supported by legs, and those legs are memories or events. And that can be from the boss telling you, from your ex-husband telling you, from your school telling you, from you failing your driving test 7 times. So we often try and, we knock out those table legs, and it only takes 1 or 2, and the whole tabletop, the whole limiting
Mhm.
belief will collapse.
I love it. I actually used to use that technique with students. So when you started talking about it, I was like, I love that technique, because I used to use it quite often with students with stress and anxiety, and just those beliefs of,
Mm.
what they have. So I love that you brought that up. It is a great technique to use. So I'd love to know, how did you get into EFT? How did this become a passion of yours?
I discovered it probably about 8, 9 years ago. So, and I'm going to precursor that. My husband had spinal surgery almost 14 years ago, and had a spinal stroke within it. They touched his spinal cord. So when he came out, he had chronic pain. And I was already in using holistic medicine within my family. So whether it be essential oils or homeopathy or flower remedies, I always already had that mindset. So I showed him lots of different ways to cope and deal with that. So I was always curious for my own learning, but also I was sort of bringing that in for him. So I came across the tapping solution, which is Nick Ortner then. And I just thought, my goodness, that's just incredible. I remember the tapping tree. My husband is a little resistant to things like this, so he didn't take that on board. But it was there in my psyche. But I was an entrepreneur at the time. So I set up and ran 3 different businesses within 10 years, while still being curious about holistic and having all of that. And I had a very bruising final experience with business partner. And I kind of had burnout and stress from that. So I fell back on my holistic toolkit, and then I trained as a kinesiologist, which I loved, which again looks at all the meridians and balancing it and the emotions. And it's using that conversation is via muscle testing. So it's a different way of talking to the body. And then lockdown happened, and my touch for health meant I couldn't touch people for help. And so I morphed into more spiritual aspects. I worked with a medium and spiritual healer. We did podcasts, and then we worked on retreats and meditation circles. I did Power of Eight. And I loved that. I went full woo-woo, and I still love it. I have a full woo-woo side to me.
I love that.
And she had to retire. She was much older than me for a health sabbatical. And I thought, okay, how can I use all of this? What's the one thing that I really want to take from all of this? I knew it was a really pivotal moment for me, how I was going to kind of transform and show up in the world. And I thought, actually, it's the one thing and all these things that I've done, it's about being a vibrational being and about understanding what that looks like. And I thought, what is a really great way of educating and inspiring and empowering people to connect to that. And I can't actually even remember how I came across it again, but always things are kismet, aren't they? They just show up when they do. And I looked for a trainer and had an amazing trainer in Spain, an English lady, and that was it. I did that and I went straight to be an advanced EFT trainer, and then I'll hopefully be a trainer as well in the next couple of years. But it kind of pulled it all together, and it made it more accessible for people because it was evidence-based. So I kind of went from straight woo-woo and I kind of balanced it all up from the other side.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I laughed when you said to help your husband who is a little hesitant, because my husband's the same way. He just kind of rolls his eyes and laughs at me with all the woo stuff, the holistic stuff, all the stuff that I do, but he'll do it to support me, like when I needed case studies or when I need to. So like if I kind of like nag him, he'll like, yeah, okay, just tell me what you need me to do. And I always think it's funny. I'm like, it's to help you. Just
Yeah.
believe me and try it. And if you don't like it, cool, but just try it and see. And then you can make that informed decision of if you like it or not, and if it was helpful or not.
He was one of my
So,
my case studies when I started, actually, and
yeah.
we do a lot of chasing the pain in EFT. So I did manage to shift all his pain and move it down his leg, and because he get quite stressed, and depression is comes hand in hand with chronic pain. So I would always manage to get him to a very still state. I do a lot of grounding and meditation when I start my sessions, and being a man and ADHD, he's just doing all the time. So in fact, to be able to create that stillness and that conversation with the body actually is quite tricky with pain, because his pain is very loud for him. He says it's like having a AC/DC concert playing in his ear the whole time. So actually, to get someone with chronic pain to sit with their pain is quite a challenge, because like actually I spent my whole life running away from it, but it's finding that balance that actually it's okay, and creating that safety for them as well.
Absolutely. No, I can resonate with that. When I had a concussion, it was very much like that loud noise. So I
Mm.
completely I can resonate with that. So now what, or I should say maybe who or what situations would EFT be beneficial for? So you've talked a little bit about, chronic pain. You mentioned a few other things, but like if someone wanted to, who would be the ideal person, I guess, to try EFT, to look into EFT if it would help them?
I mean, there's nothing it can't deal with in my mind. And I think to start, I mean, it can go from literally mental, emotional, and physical. So say it can go with pain. I have a client at the moment, lady with cancer, and helping her cope with that and diagnosis and how she's responding to that. I had a lady with MS who was very fearful for her future, and we looked at the sort of the cause or the instigation of that, and also she didn't want to go out. She couldn't. Her symptoms were quite erratic, and I remember after our first session, she sent me a message going, "I'm in the pub, and I got out the car, and I walked the whole way to the pub, and I'm really cool, and I'm ordering drinks." And it felt like such a small thing, but for her, she would never have got out the car. She would have been really fearful that her legs were going to react and stuff. Um,
That's a big
but
win.
yeah,
Absolutely.
totally, totally. She's just the most amazing woman. But also we can use it for money mindset. I did that because before I decided I wanted to work with chronic disease and adversity, I was helping a holistic entrepreneur. So I did a whole niche and branding and strategy and stuff. We did a lot around money, and so much of that came up was I'm not good enough, or it's procrastination, overwhelm. All of that mindset of being an entrepreneur worked really, really well. I
Yeah.
just felt that I've been quite closely touched by cancer, not myself, but my immediate family, a lot of my immediate family. So I really felt that was my calling to work with those chronic diseases. But it can be to confidence, self-esteem, great for phobias, fear of flying. I've done that. I've got a couple of people on holiday for fear of flying.
Nice.
Or spiders. Uh, from an evidence point of view, PTSD, which kind of feels from fear of spiders to PTSD feels huge. And it
Mhm.
really is kind of anything in between. And that's why I love it. There's no
Yeah.
barriers.
No, I was gonna say that really can, like, anybody can benefit from it by the sounds of it. The chronic pain, the chronic conditions is definitely something that is fantastic, especially like you were mentioning, with chronic pain often comes emotional aspect of depression, different things like that. So we need to work on both of those things together when people are in those types of situations. But I also love the fact that you mentioned, the limiting beliefs earlier, but then like entrepreneurs can use this to break through maybe those limiting beliefs,
Mm,
those
mm,
mindsets, all of that aspect where I'm like, yes. And I remember using it a bit for kind of just stress, anxiety, just bringing my nervous system back into balance when I'd
yeah.
feel kind of like frayed, getting
And
to a
really,
little bit
you
of that
say just
burnout.
stress, but I had this conversation with someone the other day. That word stress, it's like, oh, I had a really stressful day. And it's become so normal to
It
use it and
is,
so
which is
accepted
sad.
that we live these stressful lives. And I read all the time. If it's not crystals, it's this or it's trauma, or I'm always reading. And the more I read about stress, and I'm thinking that is the underlying thing for so many conditions, heart
Mhm.
conditions, for diabetes, for blood pressure, for cancer, for MS, which this lady had it in an extremely stressful period. And it's when we're stressed, our immune system shuts down. So
Absolutely.
it's,
Yep.
it's not just a matter of, oh, it means I can then feed the kids, or I can show up and I can be more
Yeah.
smiley. It's the biggest thing you can do for you is to
Yeah.
come out of that stressful state and allow your body, it's that rest and digest state,
Yeah.
rather than, constantly having to fight and think you're fighting a tiger.
Yeah. No, and it's when you are in a stress state, if you have a condition, an underlying condition, it just exemplifies that. It causes the symptoms to increase. It
Mm,
triggers those symptoms, to start overflowing in you.
mm,
I always like to say, the cup analogy of, if you're up here already in your cup,
mm,
and then you start to get stressed, well,
yeah.
instantly, like you're just
Mm.
overflowing. So we can bring that down. And that's what I remember using EFT for at the time, was those stressful moments to kind of just bring me
Mm.
back down. So I absolutely love, and now I'm very intrigued for, as an entrepreneur, to being like, ooh, how can I get this back into my everyday life and start doing it again, to go through that way. Um,
That's what
and
I
I
love
think
about EFT is because you can do it on your own. Once you've had a
yes,
practitioner who can go to all the stories and the childhood and all of that, it's so easy to use on your own. So it's, even though I'm really struggling to do my tax return, all those numbers, they just confuse me. I'm overwhelmed. But I'm
yeah,
okay right now, and I trust that I can get through this. All those numbers. Oh my God, this tax return. It's just overwhelming. I don't want to do it. I always get it wrong. I'm scared. I'm not great with money. And you just talk through where you're at, and having that, starting like that, you kind of end, okay, I can do this. It's
yeah,
fine. You just get rid of all that tension around that subject, or going to visit the mother-in-law, or going for a job interview, or anything like that. You just talk it out. You just talk and tap. Oh my God, I'm terrified. I don't think I'm prepared. Am I wearing the right clothes? Do I have the right answers? And then, having done a couple of rounds, you can end up going, I think I'm going to be okay. Yeah, no, I think I've got this. The sun is shining. I'm going to take a deep breath. Everything's going to be fine. I believe in myself. I think I'm going to be well. Yeah, I think I've got this. And you just end up that lovely positive round that kind of lifts you up.
oh, I love that. So that kind of thinks of, would you mind doing like an actual
Mm,
example of
yeah.
one? We do have, I'm just thinking, a lot of our listeners are aromatherapy based, but entrepreneurs or people who are using essential oils safely, holistic modalities safely, that type of thing. I'm just trying to think of something a little generic, kind of like maybe just to help bring maybe a limiting, well, would it be too hard as a limiting belief because then you would maybe need something specific or maybe just something to help bring the stress
Well,
level
let's
down?
try I think it's overwhelm or procrastination, which kind of are the same side. So I'll try and cover both. But what
Okay.
I would say, what a nice thing to do to try and do it properly is if they want to pause this, if they're listening, and for everyone to take a lovely deep breath and to really come in, and obviously we won't do it to real time, but to sit with your body and go, when I'm feeling this, when I'm about to, do this thing that I'm really putting off or I'm overwhelmed by, where do I feel it in my body? And that's really, really important. And it could be a tension in the neck, it could be a hard ball in the stomach, and to really connect with what that looks like. What color is that ball? I always use the example of a red spiky ball. So I'll use that now, but whenever that comes up for your listeners, it could be a metal tension in the neck, or it could be a weakness in the throat. I can't speak up for myself. So try and identify as much as they can with that. What color is it? What texture is it? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it sweet? Is it sour? All those things. So if I leave a gap, they're kind of filling it in with that information, because this is how it differs from tapping online, because you can kind of get generic stuff. It's good. It'll shift it to a point. But when you're doing it with a practitioner, it's the way you feel about it, because you're overwhelmed, very different to my overwhelm or Sarah's overwhelm, whoever it is. And the underlying belief of that is different. So it's very important to get in touch with your somatics and how you feel. So we always start with a setup statement, which starts on the side of the hand. That sort of soft part there. We do it 2 or 3. So it's like if we're banging on a table. We're not stroking, we're not really whacking. Just a nice firm touch. And we go, even though I have all this overwhelm at the moment, I'm just putting this off. I just feel too stressed. And obviously, as Nikki's doing, you repeat it after me. And I'm open to the possibility that I can shift all these feelings. And I know that I'm okay in this moment. I've got this thing to do. I just keep putting it off. It feels big. I just feel overwhelmed at the thought of doing it. And I have all this tension in my, kind of, where are you holding it? Shoulders, stomach, hands, jaw. And it looks like, what color is it? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it blue? Is it red? All this tension in my body. Then we're going where the bra strap is. You can't quite see. And then on the wrist. Yeah, I'm just overwhelmed. It feels really big. All the fingertips. It's just too much for me at the moment. It doesn't feel safe to do this. I'm really feeling overwhelmed. And I know I keep putting it off. What if I didn't put it off? What if I released all this tension? What would happen if I just started to do it? If I just looked at it, how would that feel? I release all this tension in my, wherever it is. I think I can do this. I don't think it's as bad as I think. All this tension in my body, I release it now. I think I'm going to be okay. It's not as bad as I think. I've got the skill set to do this. I'm feeling a little more confident now. Releasing all this tension around this subject. It's safe for me to show up this way. And then normally we do 2 or 3 rounds like that, and you come back into the body and just check in to where that tension was you were feeling, that red spiky ball, that metal feeling in your neck. And more often not, the one word we get is I feel lighter. And it's just for having been able to release all of that.
Thank you. So I muted myself so that I wasn't kind of talking over you either. I didn't want to interrupt listeners going through it. So I muted it while doing it. And so I'd love to. So for those of you who are listening, I highly suggest hop over to YouTube, watch it in video form so that you can kind of see all the points. So I just want to confirm though for our listeners. So it's the side of the hand where the
So the
pinky
soft
finger
part, like what
is.
we call the karate chop, and we do that with
Yeah.
2 or 3 fingers, and all the time we're doing our setup statement, we're doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm driving, I can bang it against the steering wheel, but generally we do that. And then we go in the top of
then
the head, like a piece of string, with it right at the top of the head.
yeah.
And then we're going round the eye, so it's right where the eyebrow is in the middle near the nose. So we're all going around the occipital bone, and then we're doing the side of the eye again, not the temple, but just on the edge of that bone. And we're going under the eye again on the bone. So I've got glasses on, so it's just where the glasses are. And we do under the nose. We do on the chin. And then we're coming down to the clavicle. So it's just under the clavicles, about 4 inches apart, what we call K27. And then we're going under the arm where the bra strap is. I can do it like that. Sometimes you can stretch across and do it like that. And then we're doing on the wrist, because we have all the meridian pathways coming up to the hand. So we're going across the wrist. I'm doing that with 2 fingers. And then we're tapping on each of the finger on the nail beds, which is where all the meridians end.
I've never
And
seen it with the fingers, so I
no,
love
I know that's
that's
quite unusual.
interesting.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
tapping normally tend to stop, and you can stop, but you do have different meridians on here. So you're doing some of them, but you're doing completely when you go on the
Yeah.
fingers.
Oh,
So
I
what's
like
nice
that.
is if you're doing, let's say you're on the bus or you're feeling anxious, you can do the fingers quite subtly in your lap.
Yeah.
You can just tap them a bit like if you had like a nervous twitch or something, but that's still tapping. So you can just say, even if you don't say the words, I'm feeling really anxious, I don't like enclosed spaces, that person's making me feel really uncomfortable, or whatever it is, and you can just tap. And often people will have a favorite tapping point. So mine is here on the chest. If I do that, if I'm getting sort of anxiety and menopause or anything like that, yeah, they all do different things.
Awesome. And now, does it matter which side? So like when you were doing the side of the eye or under
Yeah.
the eye, does it matter which side?
No, you've
No?
got
Okay.
your meridians are bilateral, so they run down both sides of the body. So
Mm.
obviously the singular ones, which are the head and the under the nose and the chin, are central, but all around the eyes. Some people will tap with both hands and go the eyes,
Mm,
or they'll change hands. Sometimes they'll
that's
tap on the chest, like tap on the chest with both fingers like that. And again, I had a client yesterday. You can just, if your arm's getting tired, you can swap. Most people will tend to use their dominant hand for the tapping, but no,
mhm.
it makes no difference.
Okay, yeah, because I remember when I learned it years ago, it was always I did both at the same
Mm,
time, especially for the
mm.
chest one, it was both at the
Yeah,
same
it can
time.
feel nice doing that actually.
Yeah. I was
Really
like, this is
powerful to
just
do both.
doing this part was
Yeah.
calming.
Yeah. I mean, that's your
Um,
K27. That's your kidney point. And your
mhm,
kidney point ends, so it starts here and it ends in your bubbling spring point, which is in your feet, in the ball of your foot, kind of right there. And
mhm.
that's what we use for grounding. So when we're walking
Okay.
and we're expanding it, that's what sends that pulse of energy up to our body. So that's why that one feels really nice, because it's a really, really grounding point.
Nice. Awesome. And so how many rounds of that does someone typically do when they're talking through
It's
it?
like it differs. If I'm doing it on my own, I'll probably end up doing 2, 3, or 4. I always try and end up on a positive one. With a client, I'll always check in depending what the
Mhm,
issue is, because it's very important that the client is using their own language. So I sort of give
mhm.
them permission to interrupt and go, actually, yeah, it was anger now, but it's more frustration. It's shifted, or that feeling, it's more of a light pink. So if they're talking to me and it's shifting, we'll keep tapping as it morphs. And I'll always ask after about 4, we'll come to a point and I go, are you done or do you want one more? And some people really go, can I just have one more? Especially on the positive round, they feel that lift of positivity, but they're
Mhm.
not quite there. So we just do, yeah, I've got this. Yeah, it's not that scary. And we kind of, so it's always led by the client, really, by a session.
Yeah, no, that's great. So starting with kind of those negative thoughts, we'll say, and then the second round, maybe shifting slightly with those negative
Yeah.
shots, or
Well,
is it
just
still all those
making it
neg?
a possibility. We have a thing called parts in EFT, even though a part of me is really scared about doing that. I think there's a small part that actually could do it. Oh, but most of me is scared. There's a little bit of me that can do it. And you kind of seesaw between these two things, and it kind of
Yeah.
allows the brain to go, I think I can do that. It's not as scary as I thought. So it's nice to do that. And then you end up around going, yeah, you know what? I can do this. It's not
Yeah.
that scary. So you're just kind of teasing it out with the brain. And
Yeah.
what I tend to do also is a lot of safety in my work, which is why I do the grounding and the meditation. It's very important that the client feels safe. Um, and more often than not, if someone is fearful, I mean, procrastination, overwhelm, I think so much of it comes back to fear of embarrassment or showing up or not being good enough. And I think if you have that fear, it's really important to remind the body or to thank the body for, I know you're trying to keep me safe by putting me in fight and flight. I know you're doing a really great job. Thank you for keeping me safe, but I've got this. So you can say,
I like
even
that.
though my body's trying to keep me safe, I thank you so much, but I've got this. I think it's going to be okay. So which is why I always end up with a little finger. I'm safe to do this. I'm safe to be
Mhm.
me. I'm safe to love, because it's just reminding the body it's okay. You can come out. There's no tiger.
Oh, I love that. So many great takeaways. Thank you. Um, and now I know you mentioned earlier that there is evidence based with this. There has been research done about that. Are you able to talk a little bit? Because I know there's some people who are very much into the woo, and other people are very much into the science. And some
Mm.
people like me, I love science. I absolutely do. I love like diving into the science of why essential oils work, into the science of why meditation works, all of that type of stuff. But I don't need that science to prove to me that it works because I know I've experienced it and I know it works. So I'm going to take my own experience as like, yeah, I don't care. I know it works. So I'm going to do it. But I know some people really like that science evidence-based aspect to be able to even think about trying something. So is
Totally
there like
understand.
a few studies out there that are kind of
I have
nice
to write them
ones?
down because I'm terrible with figures. One of the things I really like is when they were doing a study and they're studying how the brain works, because often you'll compare EFT to talk therapy. And when people are
Mhm.
talking about a trauma, the Broca's area of the brain, which is all about speech, diminishes and shuts down. So people aren't always able to talk about it. Whereas the
Mhm.
right hemisphere, which highlights all emotions, increases and lights up. So when you're talking to people about how they feel about something, you're able to access the trauma that way without having to then have them to get them to explain it. Um, there were two studies that I'm going to reference today. One was comparing it to EFT to psychotherapy, which again is a talking therapy. And obviously there was a third group that had no treatment. And after a single hour session for all the groups, either not doing anything, having a psychotherapy session or having an EFT session, we're looking at cortisol, which is, again, we know it's about the stress. We know we have a cortisol elevation. It's affecting our high blood pressure, our concentration. It lowers our immune function, and we can't get abdominal belly fat and stuff like that. So we know cortisol is bad for us. So after these sessions, after an hour, the EFT cortisol dropped by 24%. The psychotherapy dropped by 0%. And also the EFT group showed improvement of 58% in anxiety, 49% in depression, 50% reduction in severity of all their symptoms, and 42% across the range of their symptoms as well.
Wow.
It's also measured against CBT, and it's similar. And they did a 5-day EFT workshop where they're looking at the heart rate variability, circulatory system, blood pressure, endocrine system, immune system, so everything that becomes part of the central nervous system.
Mhm.
And again, we had anxiety down by 39, depression 46, PTSD 32, pain by 66, food cravings 80%. And then also they upped the happiness by 13, immune system by 61, and stress hormone levels bounced out. That was 49%. And in all the
Wow.
studies, pretty much all of them, they go back and test them at 3, 6 months, and 12 months, and all the effects stayed the same. So it's not like a quick bang and you kind of
Yeah.
lose it. You're resetting the brain. That's the great thing about it. What was the phrase they used? By mirror reconsolidation, the brain's capacity to reprogram itself. So you're making long-lasting changes, which I think is
Amazing.
amazing. And they're quick,
Yeah.
much quicker. It's like 3 sessions of EFT compared to 10 sessions of CBT.
Wow, that is a So many benefits right
I know.
there. I love that. And it's nice that that there are more and more studies looking into holistic modalities, looking into
Mm,
these other things, because as much as I love, Western medicine, talk therapy, I'm a counselor. My corporate days, I was a child and youth care work and addiction counselor, so I get it. But talk therapy does not work for a lot of people. You need it in combination with other things. It's great
yeah.
to help release things. It's great to help kind of sort maybe through your thoughts,
Mm. It can
that
be
type
really,
of
really
thing.
traumatizing for
But
PTSD. People can't
yeah,
talk about it. We
no.
have a wonderful technique. So let's say something's happened. We'll use something quite non-triggering. So let's say it's a dog bite and the person can't go near dogs at all. And they can't even talk about the dog bite. It's just overwhelming. You think, well, how do we deal with that? So you could say, well, okay. And they're going, no, I can't. And they've got this real phobia. You put it in a box and we put that box with a chain and we lock it. Where would that box, where does that
Mhm.
box need to be safe? In the bottom of the ocean. So we say, even though I had this box with a chain around at the bottom of the ocean and it holds something I don't want to talk about. So you reduce the capacity of
Oh, I
that.
like
And
that.
then you kind of sneak towards going, well, if we called a movie a name about that, what would be, oh, the worst day of my life, even though the worst day of my life, and I can't even look at it. And then you sneak up going, okay. And then we play the movie on a screen and we really, really sneak up on it. So we don't have to even
Mm.
have to look at it at all. We just look at the aspects of it. So it's really, really good for trauma, very powerful.
Oh, I really like that technique. Yeah, that's really neat. And what about, and that made me think of kids with this, because kids have a hard time expressing themselves. They don't know what's happening. They just know, my stomach hurts, I get headaches, but they can't relay those physical symptoms that we often get with emotional things that are happening
Mm.
to them. They're not old enough. They just don't have that cognitive ability a lot of times to make those connections. Would this be something that could very much benefit kids?
What's lovely about kids is that you can bring different aspects. I've got a tapping teddy. He's actually a lion. And you can do this with a kid at home and you can tap on the teddy. Let's say they've had a bad day at school and they don't want to open up about it and they don't know. And they can just say, and they can tap round these points on Teddy. They don't have to do the fingers, they can just do the face. Teddy's really sad today. Teddy didn't have a great day. Teddy's really sad today. But Teddy's okay, and Teddy's going to do really well. And Teddy got a bit embarrassed in class. Someone laughed at Teddy today. So although they can't talk about it, they transfer it onto that, and it's just
Mhm.
as effective as well.
Oh,
And you end up in really nice, gentle statements like, I'm doing okay. Because you always end up with a set up statement with a nice, positive thing.
mhm.
I'm doing okay. Mummy loves me. I'm a good kid. You just keep it really, really simple. Bring in colors. If that what you're feeling was a color, and kids are great at that. I mean, their imagination's
Yes.
off the charts. So they can say, "Oh, it's like a monster," or it's a blue hot air balloon. Even
Right.
though I had this blue hot air balloon, it's flying high, and you can keep it really simple. 2 or 3 statements, just all around the body is enough, and they shift really quickly. They're really open to it.
Yeah.
But I would also say to parents, often I've had to work on the parents first because, and again, even before I was doing this, we all have our own energetic system, and you'd be
Mhm.
amazed that when we shift our own energy, how much that impacts someone else. So if the
Mhm.
parent is bothered that their child is not going to school and they're anxious or they're worried, they can tap on that, and you'll be amazed how that then shifts for the child as well and really helps.
I'm laughing inside because it's so true. Uh, our kids are very impressionable, and parents have, without realizing it, the energy we give off as parents definitely transfers to the kids.
So does.
So
I
it's
remember
just
I
so
remember when
I
I
think
dropped my youngest off at nursery and I was really chill and she's my 4th child and I was fine. I'd go, bye, darling, bye, have a nice day. And I remember the nursery teacher said to me, maybe get your husband to drop her off. And I went, no, I'm fine. She went, no, it's coming off you in waves. You're kind of doing all this theory, but the whole energy of it is not. It's
yeah,
so
and
funny.
they do, and they pick up on that
Yeah, yeah.
without us realizing it. So many times, parents, we want to kind of shelter our kids from different things, but the energy is still there, and they are observant. They pick up
Mm,
on
mm,
things,
mm. I
in the
feel
house,
it,
in schools,
literally.
everywhere. So yeah, so that's a great way to end. And more and more, I always said I wanted to work myself out of a job when I was a child and youth care worker, but more and more, I knew that would never happen because there's just so many things today that are stressful for kids, unfortunately. And it's, so this is another great thing that they could easily do in school. Like I'm thinking a lot of teenagers also who could,
Yeah.
easily, like you said, just tapping the fingers in
Mm,
classroom if there's
mm,
something, if you're going into a test,
mm,
any kind of college, university students, even, it's like there's just so many different people
mm.
who are starting new jobs, people
Yeah.
like there's just so many, the possibilities are really endless when I started thinking about it. I'm like, this is so awesome and easy to do. Like you said, even just driving in, not necessarily driving while doing the
Mm,
whole thing, but sitting in your car real quick before going
mm,
into a heavy meeting that you need to go
mm.
into.
I've got another great point, which is not EFT. It's from my kinesiology, and it's called ESR. I used it a lot in my kinesiology, which is emotional stress release. And there's a point called your frontal eminences here, so between your hairline and your eyebrows, so directly above your pupils. You're taking two fingers and you're holding them very lightly, and you can do that, or you can actually put a whole palm on your head, and you can either do it yourself, stand behind someone and do it, or hold it onto your child. And when you're doing this, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex, which is your logical ideas part of your brain. It's your processing part. So a lot of a situation will be in the back of your head. It's a very emotional, it's very intense. I'm very worried about that interview. What am I going to do? And you kind of get all scrambled up here. And by just gently holding, I always say it's a bit like you touch it like you would touch a sleeping baby. So very gently, not pushing. And when you're doing that, you're taking the energy and the blood flow to the front. So while you have this worry about the interview, and let's say it's a future thing, you can sit there and you can imagine yourself in a future event really bossing it out. I'm wearing this, I'm walking confidently, I'm asking the right questions, they seem really happy, and you can play it out in a future sense. You can also do it present tense. If let's say you've just had an argument or someone's pranged your car and you're feeling really at it, you just hold that and it just goes, okay, it's not that bad. And it allows that brain to have that process. Or I've done it in the past with things like dog bites, people being able to process. So that's a lovely one for kids. If they're anxious, just touch them, just like
I
that.
love
And it
that.
just helps the whole brain to be able to process what's happening.
Oh, I love that too. That's awesome. Well, I could seriously sit here and talk to you for hours. But looking at the time, if people want to get in touch with you, work with you, connect with you, where would they be able to find you?
So it's www.energy-coaching.co.uk.
Awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes also so that people can easily
Fantastic.
find that. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode. If you had one takeaway that you could send out to our listeners, what would it be?
For me, it's always grounding. Get out
Mhm.
there with bare feet in the grass or the sand, send your energy down, imagine the roots down, because that creates safety. And if you haven't got the safety, you haven't got the fear. So grounding for me all day long.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on
Thank
today's
you, Nikki.
episode. It was a pleasure. And thank you for all of our listeners. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for spending your time with us here at Vetiver Vibes. This episode was brought to you by Essentria, a leading online aromatherapy school. Don't forget to check out some of our free resources at www.schoolofessentria.com.
If you love this episode or you got a lot of value out of it, please make sure you share it with someone in your community who you think would enjoy it too. If you haven't already subscribed or reviewed the show yet, you can go on over to your preferred streaming platform and hit subscribe, then leave a review. This is the best way to help support us, and we appreciate it. Email us with a screenshot of your review, and we will send you a free guided meditation as our way to say thank you.
This podcast is for information purposes only. We are certified clinical aromatherapists and holistic health professionals. If you have a medication concern, please refer to your health team. Everyone's health is unique to themselves, so the topics and suggestions stated may or may not apply directly to you.